Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about my journey as a parent and discovering my boy has ASD, the journey we went along to get his diagnosis. Yeah. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful to other parents out there that go on this journey. It can be a really hard journey to go on for any parent. I guess I found it quite difficult in the beginning, and for parents out there that have children that are high functioning, I think you'll understand, because a lot of the symptoms you can just dismiss, I guess, as, you know, young child development stages or whatever. You know, sometimes, I know I did, I lived in denial for quite a while. Anyway, so let's start at the beginning. Scott was born 2 weeks overdue. He was a whopping 11 pound 11 born, and seemed, you know, beautiful, normal, healthy baby. Nothing really popped up for us in terms of anything abnormal, whatever normal is, until he was around 4. When he was 4, one day he'd had his bath, and like most children his age, he didn't like the sound of the bath plug being pulled out. So he'd left the room, and I pulled it out and was tidying up. And then Scott rushed into the room, grabbed his favourite toy, which he'd forgotten, and spun around to go out the door. And that was when he spotted the bath draining. And he saw the little water spout. And he seemed quite fascinated. He looked closer, and then he hopped up on his tippy toes and he flapped. And I just stood in absolute disbelief, because as a teacher, to me, I knew what that was. You know, in my mind, I instantly said, "Holy mother trucker, I know what that is." And I was kind of left thinking, pondering, this doesn't seem right, because he didn't quite fit any other signs or symptoms. And that's when I thought, right, well, I need to go and talk to my husband. And I sat down and I talked to my husband about what I'd witnessed and what I thought. You know, I said, you know, that's a clear sign of autism. And, you know, my husband's a nurse, and he said, well, yeah, it is, but it, you know, it can also be a sign of someone just being excited. People that are excited can flap. So, you know, we kind of dismissed that and went about our lives. And, you know, I guess when you look retrospectively, there were signs, but at the time you didn't really think much of. It's not until you sort of put them all together that you start seeing the pieces of the puzzle fit. So, yeah, you know, for Scott, I guess once I'd seen the flapping, I went to my research, my notes that I had on teaching, and I had worked with children on the spectrum over many years, so I knew some of them, but I wanted to check the facts. I went through the checklist, and some I could check off and some I couldn't. Like, Scott has always been a very social boy. He could talk your ear off. He's very popular and can have long conversations with people. He can look you in the eye when he talks. He can greet and farewell. He had an amazing imagination. So those things, there were things that just didn't quite meet the criteria, I guess. But there were other things as well, like he used to hate his haircut. We used to use the clippers on our children, well, our boys anyway. And he would absolutely scream the house down. And I didn't quite understand it. And when I talked to him, he mentioned that the noise was too much. It was too loud. So, we went out and we bought quieter and quieter clippers. And it didn't seem to make a difference. He would still scream the house down, and we'd have to distract him or find treats to get through it. The other thing we found was he loved having a bath, having a shower, but getting in was like a whole nother story. It would take quite a bit of convincing to get him in the shower or in the bath, and but once he was in, it was just fine. He loved it, and it would again be a struggle to get him out. And I'd quite often joke with him that one day I'd make him a story about the boy that didn't want to shower, but then when it came to getting out, wouldn't want to get out. Anyway, what else? I guess on retrospect, at preschool, he used to go to preschool with me. There'd be small things that didn't quite make sense. Like, we'd always have mat time, and he loved mat time. He loved singing, he loved joining in, but every time we came, we'd sit in our circle and we'd do brain gym. And when we did brain gym, he'd just flop down to the floor and absolutely refuse. And I just didn't make sense to me. I was quite confused by it. And of course now I understand, that whole left-right brain crossover thing was just too much for him to cope with at that point. The other thing he had issues with was games like musical chairs. Now, if he wasn't the person that won, he'd have a massive meltdown. If he wasn't picked first for for different activities, like if you had the song Five Little Monkeys and you didn't pick him, he'd have a meltdown. All those sorts of things. His sense of injustice was really high. Anyway, again, as the years passed, it sort of came back as he went to school. The teacher would make different comments about his behaviour and how he'd flop to the floor, how he'd refuse to do things, how he'd have tantrums or meltdowns, how he wouldn't interact with other children. Anyway, for me as a parent, what really stuck in my head was the flapping. Every time I saw him flap, which increased more and more over the years, my gut would just say, okay, this isn't normal, that's a sign of autism. And yeah, it was a really strong voice for me, and I guess that's what really pushed me to keep trying to look for assistance in getting him diagnosed. Eventually, with the help of the teacher and other health professionals, we went through the process of getting him diagnosed. And after a long talk with my husband, I said, look, let's just do it, and if it comes back that he's not, and I was wrong, what harm can it do? At least we can rule that out. So we did that, and I remember going to the psychologist and having this array of questions about my pregnancy, and did I drink, and did I smoke, and did I take drugs. And I remember being quite horrified, looking at this professional thinking, is she judging me? Did I do something wrong? If he's got ASD, is it my fault? It was quite a hard process to go through. Anyway, she did all her assessments, and she came back and she said, nope, he's perfectly fine. He doesn't meet the criteria of being on the autistic spectrum at all. And I sat there and I looked at her and I said, are you sure? Because he flaps, he does all these things. And I said, is he not at least Asperger's? And she said, nope. And I was like, okay. So we went away, and we said, all right, well, we've got our word from the specialist that he's not. So we left it and kind of accepted that, we've just got a quirky child. Anyway, a few more years passed, and it wasn't until we moved house that I noticed a few behaviours again. I guess one thing I found was the older he got, the more pronounced his symptoms became. He flapped more. I noticed things like, yes, he'd look me in the eye when he talked to me, but if he met a stranger, he wouldn't look at them in the eye. Lots of different things, and I'm not sure whether that was because of his age and that his symptoms were becoming more pronounced, or that I was becoming more aware of what autism can look like. I'm not sure, but anyway, Scott didn't deal too well with the move. Of course, change, hello. He found it very hard. But once he got there, once he got to the new house, he and he saw all his stuff was there, he was fine. But what stood out for me was, we were meeting new people because it was a new region, and people would be meeting Scott and they'd say to me, oh, don't want to be rude, but does Scott have special needs? And I'd never ever had people do that before. And I thought, well, come on, if they can see there's an issue and I can see there's an issue, surely there must be an issue. And actually it was through a friend of a friend, and that friend had a severely autistic child, and she had met Scott, and this friend of mine said, look, you need to meet this friend, she wants to talk to you about Scott. And I was like, oh, okay. And I met this lady, and she said, look, she sat me down, and she said, look, I've met Scott, and in the 5 minutes that I spoke to him and I saw him walking towards me, his mannerisms, everything about him, she said, honey, he's on the spectrum. You just need to deal with it. And I was just like, oh, right, okay. And I said, but we've had this specialist say, no, he's not. I must say, at this point, we did get a diagnosis of dyspraxia. But, yeah, anyway, and she said, look, who did you see? And I told her, and she said, oh, okay, well, that lady's actually a reliever. She's not a full-time psychologist. You need to see this person, and this is what you need to do. So she walked me through it, and she said, you've got to take videos, you've got to take notes, you've got to get teachers to take notes, you've really got to have the evidence behind you. So I did all those things, and I went and got him reassessed, and luckily the psychologist we saw was just amazing, obviously experienced in his field, and yeah, he took some time to get to know Scott, to talk to him, saw my videos, saw my notes, and he said, look, I've got no doubt that he's on that spectrum. And I was just blown away. And I said, well, why has there been this confusion? And he said, well, it's because you've done such an amazing job as a mother, as parents. You've taught him the social cues. You've taught him to look you in the eye, to say hello, to say goodbye, all those things. So credit to you, which was nice, but it didn't quite help at the time. And anyway, once we got our diagnosis, I remember walking out the door with a huge booklet, full of information about ASD, and yeah, I just remember feeling overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed, and the tears started, and yeah, that whole sense of loss of I'm missing out on something that, that perfect child. That grieving process you go through, I guess. There was also a side to me that was like, yes, I was right, yes, my mummy gut was right, and that was very, very empowering for me, knowing that, my senses weren't leading me wrong. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for now, and we'll continue on this path in my next video. So wait for my next upload, and remember to like and share and subscribe.